Do you have concerns about aging? I had a good friend die of a heart attack when we were both in our early 50s. Another friend and colleague that died from cancer just a couple of weeks before he was going to retire. Have a friend that had a stroke, and now um, the two of them aren't able to travel like they had planned for in their retirement. And more people are afraid of Alzheimer's than heart attack, cancer, and stroke combined. Maybe you're afraid of falling as you get older or becoming frail, lonely. You want to retain your mobility and your independence. The information in this presentation is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant to substitute for medical care or to prescribe treatment for any specific health condition. Any products mentioned are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. I'm Gary Stark. I'm a retired math, science, and statistics instructor for college and high school. And I'm also a certified fitness nutrition coach. There's a picture of my dad and our family when I was young. I'm the baby sitting on my mom's lap. My dad started having heart problems around age 50, and he was put on a lot of medications. And then around age 60, he had cancer. I went through chemo and then on a lot of medications after that. And they always had a tough time getting the medications balanced because one would affect the other, and they kept changing it. And he never had a good quality of life until he died from a stroke in his early 70s. Now, we didn't realize it at the time, but the conditions are all related. Metabolic syndrome is a cluster of conditions that occur together, increasing your risk of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes, and also most forms of cancer and Alzheimer's. Now, the diagnosis of it is if you have three of the following conditions. So, a large waist. So, for women, that's 35 inches or more. For men, more than 40 inches. High triglyceride level, so above 150. A low amount of the good cholesterol, HDL cholesterol. So, for guys, less than 40. For women, less than 50. Having your blood pressure be elevated, so more than 130 over 85, and having high blood sugar, greater than 100. So if you have three of the five, you're diagnosed as having metabolic syndrome. Now at age 51, I had all five factors in metabolic syndrome. I don't have many pictures of me over 200 pounds, and you can tell I did my work to lose weight as fast as I could from the two pictures, which are pretty close together. Um, that year, I was also diagnosed with my first of 7 bouts of melanoma cancer. And it's scary when you get your first diagnosis of cancer. I was teaching school and I asked my principal if I could take the afternoon off. Um, and I went to my son's track meet. And I thought to myself, how many more times would I be able to see my kids compete? Or would I be able to walk my daughters down the aisle or play with our grandkids? So I did what I could to get in shape and become healthier. So I ran quite a bit, and that's how I lost the weight. I ran 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons. That's a picture of me finishing a 50-mile race. And I did lose the weight, and I was pretty sure that all my blood work numbers would come out good. So I was excited to get my blood work tested. But then at age 54, when I had it tested, I was shocked because none of the numbers improved. So I was at a 13.3% risk of having some form of heart disease, like a heart attack, within 10 years. The optimal level for somebody, a male at age 54, was 3.2%. So I was more than 4 times the risk is what it should be. And because of the high risk, I was recommended to be put on a maximally tolerated statin and at least two forms of medications that would lower my blood pressure. And I didn't want to be on any medications. After everything my dad went through with a poor quality of life being on medications, I looked to see for ways I could avoid being on medications. And I didn't believe in supplements. As a kid, my mom always told me to take a 1 a day vitamin, and quite often I did, but when I didn't feel any different. So I stopped taking supplements for quite a while. And if you just Google, you're going to see that most in the medical industry would agree with that. Most multivitamin mineral supplements are a waste of money, and the two critical problems lie with the minerals: absorption and excess free radical creation. Now, this is a demo that comes from, or slides, 3 slides that come from a demo. So the one on the left is the type I take. Copper AAOF means that the mineral is bonded to amino acids and oligofructose, and they just call it oligo. So amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, fructose is the sugar. So the mineral is bonded to AAOF. So basically, like, it would be bonded to fibers and proteins in a plant, where the copper sulfate is more the inorganic form. Now, both of them were put into a pH of 1 solution, which is very acidic like the stomach is, and both minerals dissolved. Now, the problem is absorption does not occur in the stomach, it occurs in the small intestine where the pH is 7. So baking soda was added to each mixtures to bring the pH level to 7. And as you can tell, the copper sulfate on the right, copper sulfate's what you'd find in 1-A-day, and I believe sulfate, Centrum also changed theirs to being bonded with sulfate now. And once it was in a solution that had a pH of 7, a neutral pH, then the minerals in the copper sulfate recrystallized. It didn't recrystallize in the AAOF. And you can tell by the 2 graphs, so the left one's on copper, right one's on zinc. The green line at the top is the type I use. So it's almost 100% absorbable. Where you look at the other type, it's not as good. When you look at 1-A-day and Centrum, much less. The second problem that occurs with the minerals is they create a bunch of free radicals. Free radicals are what causes oxidation in your body. So if you hear of oxidation, that's what destroys your cells and basically cause your cells to age and you to age. So ascorbic acid, or vitamin C, an antioxidant, was added to both solutions. And after 5 minutes, you can tell that the one on the right side became more rust colored. Rusted iron is basically iron that's been oxidized. So this vitamin C was oxidized. It's used up, so you may not be able to absorb the minerals. Plus, it may destroy the antioxidants that are in the vitamin mineral supplement that you take. And again, the 2 graphs, the green is the type I take. And after 5 minutes, we'll look on the one on the left. After 5 minutes, is still over 40% of the vitamin C remains, where in the copper sulfate, the 1-A-day, there's very little antioxidant left. So you're losing a lot of the nutrients that your body isn't going to get help from. And I was still looking for, did I want to take a supplement? Then a study came out called the Freiberg study. It was published in 2015 of the Peak Performance Pack, which again is from Melaleuca, involving 48 humans. 24 had metabolic syndrome, 24 were more healthy. They studied 25 health markers, and improvements were seen statistically, significant improvements seen in all 25 health markers studied after 12 weeks. Now, it improved for those with metabolic syndrome. It lowered the triglycerides by over 40%, increased the good cholesterol by over 25%, lowered blood glucose by 44%, and blood pressure by 8 to 9%. Now, those 4 are the 5 for 4 of the 5 from metabolic syndrome, with the other one being waist circumference. But 3 other things that occur with metabolic syndrome and with related diseases: oxidative stress, insulin resistance, inflammation. It lowered oxidative stress by over 50%, insulin resistance by over 20%, and inflammation by more than 30%. Now, the pack has 6 different supplements in. So this is what I started to take. So it had the vitamin mineral supplement that's bonded to the proteins and fibers, has a high EPA omega-3 with DHA also, a broad spectrum antioxidant with A, C, and E, also lycopene and other things, a probiotic that is acid in an acid resistant capsule, meaning that when the capsule passes through your stomach, the stomach acid isn't going to destroy the probiotics also. Antioxidants for the heart, including grape seed, grape skin extract, resveratrol, quercetin, ginkgo, and then an anti-inflammatory with ginger, curcumin, green tea extract, and others. So there's 6 different supplements in there. Costs a total of $82 through the month, less than $3 for a day. I thought that was worth it because I didn't want to go on any drugs. So after 3 years of taking it, so this was when I was age 57. Um, so the previous was at age 54 when my heart risk was at 13.3%. Now my heart attack and heart disease risk was down to 4.8%. So I cut it by about a third. And that was the optimal level for a 54-year-old male. So I was able to get my risk down to the optimal level. Now I continue using the Peak Performance Pack. I have none of the 5 risk factors for metabolic syndrome. My risk for heart disease is at an optimal level for my age. I've been cancer-free for 5 years, and I regularly jog the mountain trails in Rocky Mountain National Park, and I compete in races like the Boulder Boulder 10K and Spartan races, where you run 3.5 miles, pick up a 100-pound stone, carry it around, do burpees, climb a bunch of fences. But at my age, I'm still able to compete against people that are half and a third of my age. Now, my wife's family, so there's her 3 sisters and her parents. This was taken about 12 years ago. And at that time is when her mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And it was tough. We lived in Colorado. They lived in Minnesota. And she went home from time to time to visit. And I remember she went back by herself once and called me on the phone crying. I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "My mom didn't recognize me." And then about 2 months later, we both went back to visit. And they would only allow 2 in at a time. She first went in with her older sister. And when she came out, she was in tears again. I said, "Didn't your mom recognize you?" And she said, "No, I didn't recognize my mom." And after 2 months, her health had deteriorated that much that she was just a totally different person. And in another month or 2, she was dead. And then just about 4 years later, her dad also died from Alzheimer's. So she lost both of her parents to Alzheimer's, and her sister was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So that's the reason I started doing this study. Deaths for Alzheimer's have increased by more than double. 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's or some form of related dementia. Medicare and Medicaid expenses are expected to cover 64% of the total health care, but at about $400,000 per patient, that comes out leaving $140,000 for the family to pay for. And when you think of husband and wife, that puts it up close to $300,000 for the 2 of them. In this study, it mentions why we should start worrying about our health earlier. So this is the relationship between diabetes onset and Alzheimer's. And says at the top in red, intervening diabetes, HR is the hazard ratio. So if you don't have diabetes, then the reference ratio is 1. If you develop diabetes before the age of 60, then you have it's 2.92, so about 3 times the risk of developing Alzheimer's. But if you can delay it, so between 60 and 69, then it's only a 73% increase. 70s, then it's 23%. So it decreases if you can prevent if you can prevent diabetes or delay it then you have a much lower risk of Alzheimer's. So you want to start as early as you can. Now, this study was with over 84,000 people. Patients with metabolic syndrome were 11 and a half times more likely to develop Alzheimer's compared to those without metabolic syndrome. So remember, there's 5 factors for metabolic syndrome. And if you have 3 of the 5, you're classified as having metabolic syndrome. What I liked about this study is they looked at each of the 5 factors for metabolic syndrome and looked to see how each one individually, if that's the only thing you had, how that increased your risk for Alzheimer's. So high triglycerides increased it by 87%, high blood pressure by 85%, glucose, high stomach, obesity, and low HDL, those were all between 70 and 90% that each one increased it by. So we want to do what we can to eliminate each of the 5 factors for metabolic syndrome. Now I have 3 different articles or studies that came out within 6 days of each other. So this is from June 13th of 2024. Self-administered gerocognitive examination, the SAGE test, for early diagnosis of cognitive decline. And it's almost the same thing as the MoCA, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test, that most general practitioners would use first to check to see if someone should go over further testing for dementia or Alzheimer's. And it says current estimates indicate that up to 50 to 75% of dementia cases are undiagnosed at early stages when there's more we can do about it. When they use the SAGE test, which again is called self-administered examination. So it's a paper and pencil that you can do at home. And it's only like one question short of what the MoCA test is that your doctor would use. So if patients would use this at home and then take the results to their primary care provider, then the physicians were able to have 6 times higher likely of diagnosing cognitive decline. 3 days before that, FDA advisors strongly backed new Alzheimer's drug despite risk and limitations. And you just can't see on the bottom, it's for the drug donanemab. I couldn't use their chart. They wanted me to pay $3,800 just to be able to use the chart in here. So I came the best from their information of duplicating the chart as best as I could do. And you can tell donanemab's in the red and the placebo, the control group's in the blue, and the vertical is the change in the Alzheimer's disease rating scale. So the donanemab didn't mean that you were decreasing your risk. You're still increasing the risk, but it's at a slower rate for the first 36 weeks. So that's less than a year. And then after that, the lines are pretty much parallel, meaning you're decreasing at the same rate. So the donanemab basically helps for a short time, as you can tell at the end. The blue dot at 64 weeks, the red dot at 76 weeks are pretty much at the same level. So it saves you basically about 12 weeks. So it was just under 3 months that they said in the trial that it would help. So those are the limitations. It doesn't help much. You're still declining. Just for the first few months that you're using it, you're declining at a slower rate. Now, the adverse effects that were reflected in the article. So there were 853 patients in the donanemab group, 874 in the placebo. There were more deaths in the treatment group, more deaths related to treatment. You're going to look at the ARIA-E. ARIA sounds like a really, almost a nice term. There's a resort in Vegas called ARIA, but this ARIA stands for amyloid. Amyloid's the plaque that forms on the brains of about half of Alzheimer's patients, not all, but about half. Amyloid related imaging abnormalities is urea. Now the E at the end stands for edema or swelling. So brain swelling is what happens. So 205 in the treatment group versus 17 in the placebo. If you look at the moderate to severe urea E cases, 69 to 1. So about 70 times more likely of having brain swelling with the treatment compared to with the placebo. The urea H, the H stands for hemorrhaging, which means brain bleed. So there is, again, if you look at the severe, 141 to 23. So almost 7 times as likely to have brain hemorrhaging, brain bleeds with the treatment. And then also superficial siderosis is basically of the central nervous system, so it affects your central nervous system. Your gait may be weakening, your speech, your sense of smell. Again, much higher in the treatment group. Same thing with infusion-related reaction. So the way that they inject the drug is by infusion, and it's, again, much higher in the treatment group versus the placebo. So those are definite risks to look at. And the cost. So again, you're only gaining less than 3 years of mental capacity. Taking the drug, it costs $32,000 a year. So usually they put you on for 18 months because it doesn't help after that. So that's $48,000. So with those risks and with only 3 months of extended, possibly quality life, to me, I didn't want my wife to try that or any of the other drugs that are out there now for Alzheimer's. Now, 3 days before that came out was a study. New research shows that a set of healthy lifestyle habits can help preserve brain function in folks with mild cognitive impairment or early dementia. And so this was out direct, so just lifestyle improvements. So the treatment group's on the left, the control or placebo is on the right. In the treatment group, so there were only 24 in one group, 25 in the other, so it wasn't a large sample. But 71% either improved or didn't change, at least didn't worsen, where in the control group only 32% didn't change. None of them improved. And 68% in the control group worsened. So this is more the area that you should be looking at lifestyle changes that can make a difference. Now, this is by Dr. Dean Ornish, who I greatly respect. So there are 4 main lifestyle changes. Diet, so it's basically a vegan diet. I'd have a tough time on that. Very strict on where your calories, protein, and carbs are, the amounts and what they're coming from. Exercise, stress management, group support. So it was during COVID. They were hoping to do it more in person, but this was all done mostly on Zoom. And they did 4 hours a day, 3 days a week, for, I believe it was 5 months. And then they were also sent supplements to take. So omega-3s that we talked about, curcumin's listed up there, multivitamin mineral, CoQ10, vitamin C, B12, a few other things, including a probiotic at the bottom, lion's mane. Now, those supplements, when I looked them up online, either from the manufacturer or Amazon or everything I could find, the cheapest I could find for that for a month's supply was $280, which is worth it. The whole program he has now at different medical facilities across the country, not many, a couple of them, I should say. So we shortened it down to 2 sessions a week. And this is for 9 weeks, but it's $9,500. Again, probably worth it, but you have the things to do. He sends you the food and the supplements, and then you go on Zoom for the rest of it. $9,500 for 9 weeks, so $1,000 a week. If you have Alzheimer's, that's quite possibly worth it. Now, the Alzheimer's Association is doing a study right now. Um, it's called the U.S. Pointer Study, and they have 2,000 people on it from, I think, 4 different facilities. And again, a lot of it's the same. Physical exercise, diet. They use the MIND diet, which is a combination of the Mediterranean and DASH diets. Cognitive training, so they use Brain HQ, which is also what I recommend on mine, or one of the many I recommend on mine. And then they have health coaching, some in person, some online. And this one does not include supplements, which makes you think, are supplements necessary? For most people, eating a nutritious variety of foods can provide all the nutrients they need. And that's from a registered dietitian with the National Institute of Health. Now, most in the medical industry would agree with that a good diet can provide all the nutrients you need. But can is the key word. Most people do not come close. So using government data for those age 51 and over, 42 don't meet the estimated average requirement for vitamin A, 45% for C, magnesium, calcium, vitamin E, 95% don't reach it for vitamin D. For fiber, only 12%, so 1 in 8, 7 out of 8 don't have more fiber than what's recommended. Now the USDA doesn't set requirements for omega-3s. The National Institutes of Health recommends 1.1 to 1.6 grams of omega-3 fatty acids, that's the DHA and EPA. American Heart Association recommends 3 grams if you want to lower blood pressure. Now the median for those 51 and over is 60 milligrams. That's less than 5% of 1.6 grams that's recommended by the National Institute of Health. The 95th percentile, where the top 5% begin, that level for omega-3 is just 200 milligrams, so still less than 20% of what we should have as a bare minimum. And that's for the top 5%. So we are not getting the supplements we need. If you look at vitamin B, it looks good to begin with because only 9% are lacking of B12. It's higher for folate and B6. But it's misleading data. The European Union has double the amount in their requirements. And we should probably have double the amount of what the US requirements are for magnesium as well. WebMD says older people are more likely to get vitamin B12 deficiencies because its absorption from food relies on stomach acid. And as people age, stomach acid begins to decline. It recommends testing for vitamin B12 deficiency starting around age 60. A comprehensive Chinese review research in 2020 described homocysteine lowering as the most promising intervention for Alzheimer's disease prevention. Homocysteine is mostly controlled by your B vitamins. And of the 3 B vitamins, mostly B12, B6, and folate. The U.S. National Institute of Health review attributes 22% of the risk of Alzheimer's to raised homocysteine, and another 22% of a lack of seafood and omega-3 oils. And according to research from 2024, the combination of high homocysteine, low omega-3, and low vitamin D is present in the majority of those over 50, meaning the majority are lacking in all 3 areas, and that quadruples the risk of dementia. So back to the question, are supplements necessary? I believe they are. The Alzheimer's Association, most in the medical industry, believes everything should come from food. In the Pointer study, they used the MIND diet scoring rubric, which you can see there. And I have the same thing in the Better Aging Guide, but I don't rely just on that. And I came up with an easier table to keep track of your on a daily and weekly basis of what you're consuming for the diet rubric. Now, I went through and came up with a weekly food group diet that would come up with a perfect 15 out of 15 score on the Mind Diet rubric. And it includes quinoa, kale, salmon. And what was kind of surprising, once I looked at the levels, and you probably can't see it, but there's 18 different nutrients that I looked at. The part that's circled, that represents ones where even with a perfect score was still below the recommended amount, which was 16 of the 18. So you can't see the ones on the right are also circled, the zinc, DHA, and EPA. And 9 of the 18, even with a perfect score, you're still under half of the level that you should be receiving. So you can eat extremely well and be dreadfully deficient in nutrients. A lot of people aren't aware of that. That just because you are doing a diet the way the medical industry says you should be doing the diet doesn't mean you're getting the nutrients you should. Now, before taking supplements, I recommend getting your blood work tested. At least for homocysteine, which is an indication of your B vitamins, omega-3s, and vitamin D. So remember, if you have all four problems with all four, which the majority of adults do, then that's 4 times the risk for Alzheimer's. The next most important are the antioxidants. So one thing you can test is your glutathione index, your A1C, and your high sensitivity C-reactive protein, which is a measure of inflammation. Now, in the Better Aging Guide, I recommend 3 sources where you can get the testing done. I recommend that you input your data into foodforthebrain.org to calculate your dementia risk index functional drift test score. Now, if you know that you're probably lacking in nutrients, you may decide to save your money and on the testing and just start with a good supplement plan and then test later to see what type of changes, because most people aren't close to where your blood nutrients should be. Now, I developed a rubric for supplements. So I started with the nutrients that Dr. Dean Ordish used in his trial, and I looked over hundreds of different studies on preventing cognitive decline. And I looked at the different areas and assigned point values depending on what the optimal doses should be from research on humans. I didn't care on the test tube trials, just ones that were done on humans. And it came out to a total of 15, the same as the rubric for the Mind Diet. And then I looked at some of the main ones. So I'll have one a day, Centrum. So they came out at 3.5 out of 15 and 4 out of 15. Now they're very inexpensive, but they don't have most of the stuff that you need for dementia protection. From the Ornish study, again, that's $280. It came out with a rating of 10 out of 15. The Peak Performance Pack came out at 10.5, and that's only $82. So that's the type I started taking back in when I was age 54, so 11 years ago. The Peak Brain Pack, a couple years ago, I started my wife on that, and that's $113, and the score was up to 13. And I didn't even know until a couple months ago so after I did the supplement score, that Melaleuca had a brain mood bundle. It's $150, but it came out of 14.5 out of 15. So that's what I have my wife on now. And once I got some of my other results, I've been taking some other things that are in there as well. Now, with the Better Aging Guide, it starts out where you take baseline data. So there's 3 cognitive assessment scores. So one of them is the SAGE test that I mentioned earlier. That's a paper and pencil test that you can administer online. That's just like what your general practitioner takes. And two online tests that they're a little bit different from each other, but have all three of them then will give you a score, and then you can check 3, 6 months later, a year later, whatever, to see if you're improving or declining. Other baseline data: 5 assessments for balance, 6 assessments for strength, including, we have them come out, do their grip strength, comes out with a reading, and then, so there's 6 different things on strength, 6 on flexibility, 4 on their cardio fitness, the 5 factors for metabolic syndrome, other blood work. So I hope you at least get omega-3, vitamin D, and homocysteine work done, but there's others also that should be recorded if you choose to. And then entering those into the Food for the Brain site, you can get your dementia risk index score. So that's the baseline data. And we have a manual that explains how to get all of that, and some videos we'll have as well. And then you keep track of your weekly activity. So participants record weekly data points for their physical activity, which includes vigorous and moderate activity, strength training, including heavy resistance training and moderate intensity, and grip strength training. For diet, they keep track of from the MIND diet, and then supplements comes from the rubric. Mental activity, so there's free online training using like Brain HQ, Lumosity, a few other things, Wordle, Sudoku, doing puzzles are great. Social contact every day, and then you also want it to be with different people throughout the week. So you keep track of those scores, and also scores for your sleep, passive screen time, alcohol consumption, and smoking. Now the weekly total is 161 points. You decide which areas you want to focus on first, and then you strive to improve that score each week. Now, the easiest one is probably supplements. And again, that makes a huge difference, again, because 22% of those with high homocysteine can reduce that and reduce the risk from dementia just by taking B vitamins. And same thing with omega-3s and vitamin D and others. And the second easiest one is we also include a grip strength. So you can just, if you're sitting watching TV, so I have one by our couch. Well, I have a couple of them, so both of us can sit there and do really easy workouts and improve our scores that way. Now, the Better Aging Guide includes, so there's a 30-page user's manual that includes all the instructions for the program, finding the baseline scores. There's a 25-page research behind the guide. And this is probably what makes the program different from anything else out there, is that everything is based on the most current research. I went over probably 1,000 different studies. There's over 100 of them cited that I used with the literature on that. And then there's a packet with 40 pages of your daily and weekly and monthly your points on what you're doing for your physical activity, mental activity, diet, supplements, everything. There's 2 packets. So you have the daily, morning, and afternoon packets I included for the regular peak performance pack that has the 6 supplements, and then also the brain pack, not the brain mood bundle, because those come in separate. A few separate things. It doesn't include the probiotics because those should be refrigerated. So you have 5 of the 6 things. The grip strengtheners in there. Then you'll also have access to future online training videos for yoga, tai chi, which are probably the 2 best for preventing cognitive decline, resistance training, getting your baseline markers, and how to keep track of everything. So the entire program is $37. I want to make it so it's affordable for everybody to use. And if you want an additional packet for spouse or friend that you don't need everything again, so it just includes the extra packet of all the daily and weekly scoring rubrics, and an extra hand gripper, then that's $12 additional for a total of $49. If you order it, then there's also a $10 shipping and handling fee compared to if you would get it directly from me. So I hope you consider using the Better Aging Guide. You can contact me at gary@oldmountaingoat.com or text message me. Have a good day.